All right. Ready to dive deep into Atomic Habits.
Sounds good.
We're going to break down this book, really try to help all of you listening understand how habits actually work, but more importantly, how to build better ones.
Right.
And we're going right to the source for this one. We're using excerpts from the book itself.
So we're getting it straight from James Clear.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's right here with us. But we're not just going to, summarize the book. We're going to kind of go a little deeper.
Connect the dots.
Yeah. Pull out those little aha moments. The stuff you don't usually find in your typical self-help overview.
Right.
One of the first things that really struck me, and this is where I was like, okay, this is interesting, is this idea of the plateau of latent potential.
Oh, yeah.
And it really explains why we sometimes feel stuck, even when we're putting in the work.
You're working hard, but not seeing any results.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're spinning your wheels, going nowhere.
Totally.
Yeah.
So the book uses this analogy of heating an ice cube. Imagine you're trying to melt an ice cube.
Right.
And it's 25 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right.
And you keep applying heat, working at it. And the temperature slowly rises to 31 degrees.
Okay.
You've put in all this work, but there's no visible change.
No, their ice is still ice.
Yeah.
It's just colder ice.
So does that mean all that effort was wasted?
No, not at all. Think about what happens at 32 degrees.
Oh, okay.
That's when things change. That's the melting point. All that effort you put in, all that heat, even though you didn't see immediate results, was bringing the ice closer to that crucial tipping point.
So it's like maybe all those times, you've been hitting the gym consistently, but the scale's not budging, or you're working on this project that seems to be going nowhere.
It's all building up.
Yeah. Maybe those efforts aren't visible right now, but they're building up to something.
They're accumulating like potential energy waiting to be released.
Exactly, to that breakthrough.
Huh.
But how do we know we're not just, making excuses for lack of progress? I mean, how do we know the difference between this plateau of latent potential and just like actually spinning our wheels?
Right. Well, that's where tracking your progress comes in.
Oh, okay.
Being honest with yourself about your efforts.
Yeah.
Are you truly putting in the work?
Yeah.
Or just going through the motions?
Right. Yeah.
Are you making adjustments, seeking feedback, or just doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results?
Right. Makes a lot of sense. It's not just about blind faith. It's about intentional action, honest evaluation.
Oh, got it.
Okay. So even the small efforts are building towards something. But Atomic Habits goes deeper by exploring this connection between habits and identity. It argues that our habits actually shape our identity, and vice versa.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
It's not just about wanting something, it's about becoming the type of person who has it.
Ooh, I like that.
For example, it's not about wishing you had more money. It's about cultivating the identity of someone who is financially responsible, resourceful.
Okay, so are you saying that our actions are essentially votes for the type of person we want to become?
Precisely. Think about it.
Look.
If you hit the snooze button every morning,
oh, yeah?
What are you saying? You're casting a vote for not a morning person.
Right.
But, if you consistently wake up early, exercise.
Yeah.
You're reinforcing the identity of disciplined, health conscious.
Wow. Powerful way to look at it. It's not just about checking things off a to-do list. It's about shaping the core of who we are. This makes me wonder, what identity are my current habits reinforcing? What about you listening? What habits are you repeating day after day, and what kind of person are those habits creating? Let's get into kind of the mechanics of how habits actually form. Atomic Habits lays out this habit loop, this 4-stage framework.
Right. It starts with a cue, which triggers a craving. That craving leads to a response, which results in a reward. And that loop, my friend, is the engine of every habit, good or bad.
Let's use an example.
Okay.
Say your phone buzzes with a notification.
Right.
That buzz, that's the cue. It triggers a craving, right? Curiosity about the message, desire to connect, picking up your phone and checking it, that's the response.
Yeah.
And the reward is the satisfaction of seeing a message, getting new info, just feeling connected.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Neuroscientists have found that when we experience a reward, our brains release dopamine.
Dopamine.
Yeah, the feel-good neurotransmitter. It's associated with pleasure and motivation. This dopamine rush basically reinforces the habit loop, making us more likely to repeat the behavior in the future.
So we're literally wiring our brains to
Yeah.
crave those notifications, those dopamine hits. No wonder it's so hard to break bad habits.
Right.
But the good news is we can use this to our advantage, right? If we
Yeah.
understand this habit loop, we can engineer it,
You got it.
work for us, not against us.
Absolutely.
So how do we make those good habits more appealing?
Well, remember that dopamine rush?
Oh, yeah?
One way is to use what James Clear calls temptation bundling. It's a clever way to kind of hack our brain's reward system
Okay, temptation bundling.
by linking a need-to-do habit with a want-to-do habit.
All right, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Okay, let's say you need to go for a walk for your health.
Right.
But you'd much rather listen to your favorite podcast.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Temptation bundling means you only allow yourself to listen to that podcast while you're walking.
Oh, I see. So by pairing something enjoyable with a habit we need to build, we make the whole experience more attractive, more likely to stick with it. I'm already thinking of how I can use this.
Yeah.
What about you? Any ideas brewing on how to use temptation bundling to make those good habits more irresistible?
I've got a few up my sleeve, but let's talk about something else, something that's often overlooked. The power of our environment.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've all experienced how our surroundings can, subtly shape our actions.
Oh, absolutely. It's like walking into the kitchen and suddenly, bam, craving a cookie,
Exactly.
even though you weren't hungry before.
That's your visual system at work. We are incredibly visual creatures. Some experts estimate that half of our brain's resources are devoted to processing visual information.
Wow, really?
So those cookies on the counter, sending a powerful signal to your brain.
Triggering those cravings.
Yeah, influencing your actions.
Makes total sense. So if we want to build better habits, we need to be strategic about our surroundings.
Absolutely.
Make sure they're working for us, not against us.
Atomic Habits calls this optimizing your environment.
Okay.
Make good habits convenient, bad habits difficult. For example, if you want to reduce screen time, try putting your phone in another room.
Okay.
Minimize distractions. Or, if you want to eat healthier, prep healthy snacks.
Yeah.
Make them easily accessible. Keep those tempting junk foods out of sight.
Simple, but effective. The book also talks about this fascinating study on heroin addiction during the Vietnam War. It found that when soldiers who had been heavy heroin users returned to the United States, only a small percentage of them relapsed. This was surprising because, at the time, heroin addiction was considered almost impossible to break.
Yeah, it's wild. And researchers believe the reason for this was the change in environment. In Vietnam, these soldiers were surrounded by cues that triggered their addiction. Easy access to heroin, the constant stress of war, social groups where drug use was the norm. When they returned home, those triggers were removed, and many of them, just like that, stopped using.
That's incredible. It really shows how powerful our environment can be, on our behavior. For better or worse, it really makes you realize that we have more control than we think.
We can design our environments to support the habits we want to build.
Exactly. Now, speaking of making things easier, there's this one tool from Atomic Habits that I found super helpful, and it's called the 2-minute rule. And it's this really simple but effective way to overcome that initial inertia when you're starting a new habit.
Oh, yeah. The 2-minute rule, that's a good one.
Starting is always the hardest part, right?
Sure.
So the 2-minute rule basically says, break down those daunting tasks into tiny 2-minute versions.
Exactly.
So instead of saying, I'm going to read for an hour before bed,
Yeah.
I'm going to read 1 page.
There you go. Or instead of clean the entire kitchen, you could start with wash 1 dish.
Right.
The idea is to make that first step so ridiculously easy that you can't say no to it.
Yeah.
And then often, once you get started, you find that you naturally want to continue.
Oh, that's so true. I've experienced that myself. Sometimes just getting started is like half the battle. I'm curious, what's a habit you've been wanting to start? How could you use the 2-minute rule to make that first step feel effortless? Think about it, It could be the start of something amazing.
It really could. Now, let's be honest. Our brains crave instant gratification.
Oh, yeah. We want to see results, and we want them now.
And that's where this next key principle comes in. Making habits satisfying.
Ooh, okay. Tell me more. How do we hack that reward system? Make those good habits as enjoyable as possible?
Well, one simple but powerful strategy is habit tracking. Visualizing our progress.
Okay.
It's incredibly motivating. It's like those paper clips in a jar or filling in a workout log. Each check mark, each filled in square is a visual reminder of our commitment and progress. It provides a sense of accomplishment and reinforces that we're moving in the right direction.
I love that. It's like giving yourself a little pat on the back each time you stick to your habit.
Yeah.
But I can also see how tracking could become, well, a little obsessive. Like, what if you get too caught up in the numbers and start feeling like you're failing if you miss a day or don't reach a certain target?
That's a valid concern. The book cautions against getting too fixated on the numbers.
Okay.
It reminds us to focus on the bigger picture, building the identity of someone who sticks to their habits.
Okay, yeah. It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Now, sometimes we all need a little extra push to stay on track. What about those times when motivation just isn't enough?
Yes, those moments when willpower wanes. Atomic Habits suggest harnessing the power of social pressure,
Oh,
involving an accountability partner.
right.
We're social creatures, so it makes sense that having someone to share our goals with, someone who can cheer us on, hold us accountable, can significantly increase our chances of success.
I've definitely experienced that in my own life. Having someone to check in with who knows my goals, is invested in my success, it makes a huge difference. Like a huge difference.
Right. It's about creating a support system, leveraging the power of social motivation. The book even introduces this concept of a habit contract,
Oh, okay.
which formalizes this accountability. It's basically a written or verbal agreement where you clearly outline your commitment to a specific habit and the consequences for not following through.
Oh, interesting. Habit contract, like a legally binding agreement with yourself and your accountability partner.
Exactly. It adds a level of seriousness and commitment. And sometimes a little bit of humor can go a long way. The book shares this great story about entrepreneur Brian Harris, who used a habit contract to achieve his weight loss goals.
Okay.
His contract involved his wife and his personal trainer as accountability partners. And he even included some pretty funny consequences just to keep things interesting.
Okay. I'm all ears. Tell me more.
All right, so if he missed his targets for carbohydrates and protein, he had to pay his trainer. If he failed to weigh himself, he had to give his wife money. And if he skipped his sprints, he had to wear a hat, supporting his rival football team.
Oh, that's brutal. I love it.
Pretty painful consequence for a dedicated sports fan, right?
Oh, yeah. I can just imagine him grudgingly sporting that rival team's hat.
Yeah.
It sounds like having those clear commitments, those consequences, and the support of accountability partners really helped him stay motivated.
It's a strategy anyone can use. It's about getting creative, finding what works for you.
We've covered so much already. We've explored the power of small changes, identity shifts, environmental design, but Atomic Habits has so much more to offer. We still need to dive into how to make those habits stick in the long run, how to find the habits that are truly right for you, and how to deal with those inevitable setbacks that happen on the journey.
And that's exactly where we'll pick up in part 2 of this deep dive, so stay tuned. There's much more to uncover. Welcome back. Let's continue our deep dive into Atomic Habits. In the last part, we talked about making habits attractive and easy, but how do we ensure those positive changes become ingrained in our lives?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We can start with the best intentions, but life, has a way of throwing curveballs, and sometimes those good habits, they just fall by the wayside. What's the secret sauce to making those habits last?
Well, Atomic Habits emphasizes the importance of making those good habits satisfying. Remember, our brains are wired for instant gratification. If a habit doesn't feel rewarding, we're less likely to stick with it.
That makes total sense. It's like we're looking for that immediate payoff, a little dopamine hit. So how do we hack that reward system and make those good habits as enjoyable as possible?
One powerful tool is using reinforcement. The book suggests giving yourself a small reward immediately after completing your habit. It could be something as simple as a few minutes of relaxation, a delicious cup of tea, or checking off the habit on your tracker.
Oh, I love that. It's like giving yourself a mini celebration for taking that positive action. It's like saying, hey, good job, self. You deserve a little treat.
Exactly. It reinforces the connection between the habit and the feeling of reward, making you more likely to repeat the behavior in the future. But it doesn't always have to be about adding something pleasurable. Sometimes it's about removing something unpleasant.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about bad habits. They often provide some kind of immediate gratification, even if it's ultimately harmful in the long run. So one way to break a bad habit is to make it unsatisfying.
Could you give me an example? I'm always looking for ways to break those pesky bad habits.
Let's say you're trying to reduce your screen time. One strategy is to make doing nothing more enjoyable than scrolling through social media. You could create a cozy reading nook, spend time in nature, or connect with loved ones, activities that are truly fulfilling and provide a sense of satisfaction that your phone just can't replicate.
That's brilliant. It's not just about deprivation. It's about finding healthier, more rewarding alternatives. It's about filling your life with activities that genuinely nourish your soul.
Exactly. It's about shifting your perspective and finding joy in those simple, meaningful moments.
Now, we've been focusing a lot on individual strategies, but Atomic Habits also emphasizes the importance of our social environment. It suggests joining a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior.
That's right. We're social creatures, and we're heavily influenced by the people around us. Think about it. If you're surrounded by people who prioritize health and fitness, you're more likely to adopt those habits yourself.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly. The book talks about how peer pressure can be a powerful force. For better or worse, it's easier to stick with a habit when it's the norm in your social circle.
So if you're trying to build a particular habit, it sounds like it's worth considering your social environment. Are you surrounding yourself with people who support your goals? Are you part of a community that shares your values?
Those are great questions to reflect on. It's about being intentional about the company you keep and seeking out those who inspire and uplift you.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about making habits satisfying and leveraging our social circles, but what about those days when we just don't feel like doing the thing? Even with all the best strategies in place, motivation can be fickle.
You're absolutely right. Motivation comes and goes. It's unreliable. The book shares a fantastic quote from an Olympic coach who said, "Motivation is fickle. It comes and goes. It's unreliable. That's why you can't count on it."
So if motivation isn't the answer,
Right.
what keeps those highly successful people going day after day, even when they don't feel like it?
The key takeaway is that successful people don't necessarily feel more motivated than anyone else. They've just learned to show up consistently, even when they don't feel like it.
So they're about building that discipline and commitment to showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of those fluctuating emotions, it's about making it non-negotiable.
Exactly. And one way to make that easier is by creating a motivation ritual. The book suggests doing something you enjoy immediately before a difficult habit.
So if you're dreading a workout, you could listen to your favorite upbeat song beforehand. Or if you're struggling to get started on a writing project, you could light a scented candle and make yourself a cup of tea.
Exactly. Those little rituals can help shift your mindset and make the task feel less daunting. They create a sense of anticipation and enjoyment, making it easier to get started.
That's a great tip. I'm definitely going to try that. Now, in the first part of this deep dive, we talked about the plateau of latent potential and how we might not see immediate results even when we're putting in the effort. Atomic Habits also reminds us that this can be incredibly discouraging, especially when they're first starting out.
This is where the concept of the valley of disappointment comes in. It describes that period where you're putting in the work, you're showing up consistently, but the results haven't materialized yet.
Oh, I've been there so many times. It's like you're putting in all this effort, but you're not seeing any progress. And you start to doubt yourself and wonder if it's even worth it.
It's a common experience, and it's easy to give up during this phase. But Atomic Habits emphasizes the importance of persevering. It's about trusting the process and remembering that progress isn't always linear. It's often messy and unpredictable.
So how do we stay motivated and keep going when we're in that valley of disappointment? How do we avoid throwing in the towel when things get tough?
This is why it's so crucial to focus on building systems, not just setting goals.
Okay, can you break that down for me? What's the difference between goals and systems?
Goals are about the results you want to achieve. The destination systems are about the processes that lead to those results. They're the journey.
So if your goal is to run a marathon, your system might involve a weekly training schedule, proper nutrition, and adequate rest.
Exactly. The problem with focusing solely on goals is that once you achieve the goal, you might lose motivation. What happens after you cross that finish line?
You're right. It's like you've reached the destination, and now you're not sure where to go next. But if you have a solid system in place, the process itself becomes rewarding, and you're more likely to continue those habits even after you've reached a specific milestone.
It's about falling in love with the process, not just the outcome. It's about finding joy in the journey, in the daily rituals and routines that contribute to your overall growth and well-being.
That's such a powerful shift in perspective. It's not just about achieving that one big goal. It's about cultivating a lifestyle, a way of being that supports your long-term aspirations. Now, Atomic Habits goes even further and challenges us to think about how our habits can change not only our results, but also our beliefs about ourselves.
This is where things get really meta. It suggests that by consistently taking action, we can actually change our underlying beliefs and create a new self-image.
So if you want to believe you're a writer, you need to start writing. If you want to believe you're an artist, you need to start creating.
Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. It's like you're casting ballots for your future self, shaping your identity one habit at a time.
Wow, that's incredible. So those small, seemingly insignificant actions have the power to transform not only our behavior, but also our beliefs and our sense of self. It's about becoming the architect of your own identity.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the idea of identity-based habits that we talked about earlier. By changing our actions, we can change our beliefs and ultimately change our identity. It's a powerful cycle of transformation.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. It's not just about individual habits, it's about a holistic approach to personal growth. Now, I'm curious to know more about those specific strategies for making those positive habits stick. What other tools does Atomic Habits offer?
Well, one principle that stood out to me is the power of making bad habits difficult. The book refers to this as increasing friction.
What does that mean in practical terms? How do we actually make those bad habits harder to do?
Well, let's say you're trying to reduce your screen time. You could increase the friction by deleting those tempting social media apps from your phone or installing a website blocker that limits your access to time-wasting websites.
That's clever. The more effort it takes to engage in the bad habit, the less likely you are to do it. It's like putting obstacles in your own path, making it easier to choose the right thing.
Exactly. It's about being proactive and designing your environment to support your goals. Even when your willpower is low, Atomic Habits takes this concept a step further by suggesting we make good habits inevitable and bad habits impossible.
Okay, now you're really intriguing me. Making good habits inevitable and bad habits impossible. How do we do that?
This is where the power of technology and automation comes in. For example, you could set up automatic savings deposits to ensure you're consistently investing in your future, even if you forget or feel tempted to spend that money elsewhere.
That's brilliant. It's like putting your financial goals on autopilot. What other examples can you think of?
Well, if you're trying to eat healthier, you could use a meal delivery service that delivers pre-portioned healthy meals to your doorstep, reducing the friction of planning, shopping, and cooking.
I love that. It's about removing those barriers and making it as easy as possible to choose the healthy option.
It's about setting yourself up for success, even when you're not actively thinking about it. It's about creating an environment that nudges you in the right direction.
This is blowing my mind. It's like we can outsource our good habits to technology and automation.
In a way, yes. It's about leveraging the tools and resources available to us to make those positive changes more sustainable.
Speaking of sustainability, I'm curious about how we find those habits that are truly right for us. After all, there are countless habits we could build, but which ones will actually lead to the most fulfilling life?
That's a great question. It's easy to get caught up in the latest trends and try to adopt habits that might not actually be aligned with our values, interests, and goals. Atomic Habits does touch on this. It suggests that understanding your personality can be a helpful guide.
So if you're someone who thrives on social interaction, you might want to prioritize habits that involve connecting with others. Or if you're someone who values structure and routine, you might benefit from establishing habits that create a sense of order in your day.
Exactly. It's about understanding your natural inclinations and seeking out habits that complement your personality and strengths.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about working with your nature, not against it. It's about finding what works for you, not trying to force yourself into a mold that doesn't fit. But how do we know what to choose? There's so many options.
Well, the book also talks about the importance of experimentation. It encourages us to adopt an explore-exploit mindset.
Explore-exploit. What does that mean?
In the beginning, you might try a variety of habits to see what resonates with you, what feels good, what aligns with your goals and values. This is the explore phase. But once you find something that seems promising, something that you enjoy and that seems to be producing positive results, you shift your focus to exploiting that habit, taking it to the next level, making it a core part of your routine.
I love it. It's like a process of trial and error, of discovering what works best for you and then refining it over time.
It's about finding that sweet spot between novelty and consistency. It's about being open to new possibilities while also committing to those habits that truly serve you.
Even when we have the best intentions and a solid plan, there will inevitably be times when we stumble. Life happens. We get busy, stressed, distracted. How do we navigate those inevitable slip-ups?
Atomic Habits doesn't shy away from this reality. It acknowledges that setbacks are part of the process. The key is to not let a missed opportunity turn into a missed habit.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap of all or nothing thinking? How do we get back on track when we veered off course?
The book has a great mantra: never miss twice. If you miss one day, get back on track as quickly as possible. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just acknowledge the slip up, learn from it, and move on.
That's such a powerful reminder. It's about being kind to ourselves, understanding that perfection is not the goal. It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. It's about building that resilience, that ability to bounce back from setbacks and keep moving forward. Now, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored strategies for making habits attractive, easy, and satisfying. We've talked about the importance of identity, environment, and systems. We've even touched on how to find the habits that are right for you. But there's one last piece of the puzzle I want to explore before we wrap up this part of the episode. Atomic Habits talks about the importance of reflection and review.
That sounds crucial.
Yeah.
It's like taking a step back and assessing the bigger picture, seeing what's working and what's not.
Exactly. It's not enough to simply set up a system and go through the motions. We need to regularly step back and evaluate our progress, celebrate our wins, and identify areas where we can improve.
So how do we actually incorporate reflection and review into our habit-building journey? What does that look like in practice?
Atomic Habits suggests scheduling regular reflection time, perhaps weekly or monthly.
And what do we do during that reflection time?
It's about asking yourself those powerful questions. What went well this week? What could I have done better? What adjustments do I need to make?
So it's about turning those experiences, both the successes and the setbacks, into valuable lessons that fuel future growth.
Exactly. It's about using those insights to refine your approach, make necessary adjustments, and keep moving forward with intention and clarity.
Okay. I'm starting to see the importance of that regular check-in, that moment of pause to assess and recalibrate. But I can also see how it could be easy to get caught in analysis paralysis.
That's a valid point. While reflection is essential, Atomic Habits also cautions against getting stuck in overthinking. It's about finding that right balance between thinking and doing.
We need to spend enough time reflecting to learn from our experiences. But we also need to spend enough time taking action and putting those lessons into practice.
It's about iterating, experimenting, and continuously refining our approach based on what we're learning along the way. And that's where we'll pick up in the final part of this deep dive. We'll explore some additional strategies for making those habits last and maximizing their impact on your life.
Okay, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Atomic Habits. We've covered a lot of ground from the science behind how habits form to practical strategies for making those good habits stick. But I want to kind of zoom out a little bit for this last part.
Okay.
How do these principles go beyond just changing individual habits? Like, how do they help us design a more fulfilling life?
That's where it gets really exciting. Atomic Habits isn't just a self-help book. It's a framework for personal growth and fulfillment. It's about using these principles to create a life that aligns with your values, your aspirations, your unique abilities.
I love that. So it's not just about checking things off a list or being more productive. It's about creating a life that feels meaningful, aligned with who you truly are. So how do we actually do that? How do we use these habit-building principles to design a life we love?
Well, one concept that really resonated with me is the idea of finding your unique abilities and leveraging them to create a game where the odds are in your favor.
That makes sense. It's like finding your sweet spot, that intersection where your natural talents and passions align. But I think, not everyone is born with this clear genetic advantage or a predetermined path. What about those of us who are still figuring things out, still trying to discover our unique abilities?
That's where exploration and experimentation come in. Even if you don't have an obvious talent, you can still create an edge by combining your skills and interests in a unique way.
So it's not about being the best at one thing. It's about finding that special way to combine your strengths and passions to create something new and valuable.
Exactly. The book gives the example of Scott Adams, the creator of the Dilbert comic strip. He's not the most talented artist, nor is he the funniest comedian. But by combining his drawing skills, his sense of humor, and his experience working in a corporate environment, he created something truly original and successful.
That's a great example. It's about finding your niche, your unique voice, expressing it in a way that only you can. It's not about being perfect. It's about being authentically you.
And that authenticity is what resonates with people. It's what sets you apart.
Okay, so we've found our niche. We're building those good habits. But how do we stay motivated over the long haul? I mean, even when we're working in an area we love, There's bound to be some level of boredom or monotony that creeps in at times.
That's true. The more we repeat an activity, the more routine it becomes, and the less novel and exciting it feels.
So how do we keep things fresh and engaging? How do we avoid falling into a rut, even when we're doing work we enjoy?
Atomic Habits suggests that variable rewards can play a role here.
Variable rewards. Remind me what those are again.
Think about slot machines. People keep pulling that lever because they're hoping for that big win, even though they know the odds are stacked against them. It's the anticipation of the reward, the element of surprise that keeps them engaged.
Ah, I see. So it's that unpredictability that keeps them coming back for more. So how do we apply that to our habits? How do we introduce that element of surprise and keep ourselves motivated?
We can introduce variety into our routines by trying new variations of our habits, setting mini challenges for ourselves, or even incorporating an element of randomness into our rewards.
So, for example, if you have a regular workout routine, you can try a new workout class once a week, or set a goal to beat your personal best time.
Exactly. Or if you're trying to establish a writing habit, you could reward yourself with a small treat, but only after you've written a certain number of words. And the number could vary from day to day. It keeps you guessing and adds an element of fun to the process.
I like that. It's about finding those little ways to keep things interesting, prevent boredom from setting in.
It's about finding that balance between structure and spontaneity. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into Atomic Habits, I want to leave you with this final thought. The book emphasizes that true behavior change is identity change. It's not about forcing yourself to do things you hate. It's about becoming the type of person who naturally gravitates towards those habits that align with your desired identity.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
It's not about willpower or discipline. It's about becoming the kind of person who embodies those qualities effortlessly. It's about aligning your actions with your deepest values and aspirations.
Exactly. So if you want to build lasting habits, start by asking yourself, who do I want to be? And then choose habits that reflect that identity.
It's about creating a life that is an expression of your truest self, a life where your habits support your growth and fulfillment. And remember, even small changes compounded over time can have a profound impact on your life.
So choose your habits wisely and watch as they transform not only your actions, but also your beliefs and your very sense of self. And that's it for this deep dive into Atomic Habits. We hope you found it valuable and insightful, and that you're feeling inspired to start building those atomic habits that will help you create a life you truly love. Thanks for joining us.
CNN.